I've taken a bit of a break from my working day. We have activities week, which means that I'm not teaching any sort of regular lessons. And it means that I've got a little bit more free time during the day to do things. And I said I was nipping out to get some coffees for the rest of my team. And I lied, because I've actually come down to the Secret Theatre. The Secret Theatre is this amazing space right now by the canal at the school that I work at. And for a state-run UK school to have something like this is nothing short of incredible. The actual stage itself, where I'm currently sat, has some nice sturdy wooden benches all the way back, going up and ascending. People at the back might well have their heads tickled by some holly bushes. And down on the actual stage itself we have a bunch of hay bales that look like they've been through the worst of the winter, and a really quite generously sized stage. I'm just going to tread the boards over here. This morning it's sort of dappled in this really gorgeous sunshine, but also it's very, very well shaded from all sides by trees, and it's, as you can hear, a real nesting place for birds. And just beyond I can just see this little glint there of the canal that runs onto the back of it. It's also accompanied by a little classroom, or an outdoor classroom, just on the other way, sort of adjacent to this as well. It's what an incredible thing to have. Never had this when I was at school, and I must admit, when I first interviewed here a couple of years ago and they told me about this, I was sold. I think it's a great thing. I think it's a wonderful thing to have children see that theatre and acting is not the preserve of the wealthy. That being said, I'm sure this was an investment. And it's a really appropriate place to be doing today's poem, because today's poem is by someone more famous for writing plays. Although saying that he was famous for writing plays is a little bit like saying that Mike Tyson could box a bit. Possibly that Pele, knew how to kick a ball. And finally tackling the man himself, William Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou hast, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So today's poem, as you've heard there, is the wonderful Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. And I was very, very fortunate a while back to pick up a copy of his collected sonnets. And my favourite place to buy books is a place called the Deanery Bookstall in Winchester, by the cathedral. There are 154 sonnets in this particular collection. And it's the Royal Shakespeare Theatre edition of the Sonnets of William Shakespeare. It's a gorgeous calligraphy in this book, done by Frederick Marnes. It's also done somewhat unusually in the sort of original orthography, but also they've made a couple of changes for ease of reading. So things like J replaces I and V is substituted for U. S takes the place of the long S. But of course, the sonnets speak for themselves. So I'm not going to give you a history lesson about William Shakespeare. If you're listening to this podcast, it's safe to say that you know a bit about him and you know a bit about English. But I don't think his poetry gets enough credit. It's spellbinding stuff. And the sonnets in particular are, I think, some of his major achievements. In a way, if he'd never published a play, he would still be known as a great poet. Some people can just do it all, unfortunately, make us mere mortals look particularly daft. I felt like today was a really good day to read Sonnet 18 for a couple of reasons, but the main one is that it's getting hot. It feels particularly sort of appropriate thinking about how too hot the eye of heaven shines. Where I'm sat, there's this almost perfect circle of trees above me, and it's creating this almost spotlight effect of the sun. Now, it's not even 11 o'clock in the morning yet, and already it is getting pretty warm out there. This is the first heat wave we're going to have all summer, and as is always the case with us Brits, we get excited until it actually gets here, and then we all moan that it's too hot. But this is a perfect place because I'm sat in the shade, but able to see this just verdant green around me. It almost seems luminous. And I think about as well with this outdoor theatre about how so many people's first impressions of Shakespeare are all wrong. They think of people walking around with long cuffs, being pretentious and over the top. And I'm sure that does happen, but Shakespeare was a man of the people. His poetry really, I think, reflects that in lots of ways. In his play, he obviously, through various characters, and sort of plot lines, takes his audience on a journey, but the sonnet form is so restrictive. It says a lot about the power of the man's writing that he could do that in 14 lines. So a quick reminder of Shakespeare's sonnets and some form, which is important. Shakespeare's sonnets tend to end with the rhyming couplet, and that sort of is characteristic of a sonnet of his style, if you like. He didn't necessarily invent it, like a lot of things. He took it and made it popular. The sonnet was obviously a very old form, Italian form by Petrarch. And then, of course, there's a Spenserian sonnet, but, I digress. The point is, you think of a sonnet, and typically, if you're a student of poetry and you want to write in a different format, you choose a Shakespeare sonnet. It's very, very invigorating, I think, to have that very clear sense of we're building towards this bang, bang at the end, this sort of... So let's take it line by line. We've only got 14 lines, and it's worth remembering that sonnets are perfect because they span both sides of what a poem can be. A poem can be narrative. It can be telling us a story. But it should also paint pictures. It should give us imagery. So lyric poetry that very much paints images but doesn't tell a story are lovely things. And sometimes poems, very much are narrative, and they give us like a subject and we follow them through. Sonnets allow us to kind of do both, really. That's why they're so versatile. First of all, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It's a line that's almost overused. It's become cliché. But all clichés are fun. That's why they become clichés. And to whom is he talking? Now, that is the subject for some debate, which I'm not going to get into here, because while I consider myself knowledgeable about Shakespeare, I'm not a Shakespeare historian. And if I had the time, I would reach out to one. But there's plenty of articles about who he is writing this to, and whether or not it is his long-standing lover, wife, Anne Hathaway, or this mysterious dark woman. We're not sure, but it's worth reading up on. Very interesting. But of course, he's referring to somebody as a summer's day. Sunshine, blue skies, happiness. We associate the sun and this with good things. And yet, like a lot of really good imagery, he's not satisfied with the cliche. He wants to turn it on its head and turns it to say, actually, thou art more lovely and more temperate. So this sense that, as I alluded to, the sunshine, the heat, we all think we want that. But when you get it, it might be a bit too much all the time. No one likes to be hot all the time necessarily. So this idea of a temperate climate, a temperate person, someone who maybe is a bit more controlled in themselves. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. I've always loved that line, the idea of it being a lease. And if you think about it, the concept of a new lease of life, when you lease something, you take ownership of it, but maybe not forever. It's a rental agreement. We only really rent summer. We have it for a short period of time and then it goes. The same as we only really rent life. It's a nice extended metaphor, I think. But this all too short a date, that slightly glum feeling we get when summer is over and autumn hasn't really settled in, that feeling isn't here yet. It will come, but it's not here yet. Right now we're in this early stage, the darling buds of May. They're being shaken by this rough wind, but it's okay because summer's still coming in. And yet he still lists all these reasons why summer is actually sometimes not so great. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. I love this idea of the sun being this eye of heaven. Real sort of almost, even for Shakespeare's time, really archaic imagery here of the sun god shining down upon us, but also this god maybe not being so friendly. It's too hot. And Shakespeare makes lots of references, I think, to weather and heat. I'll always think of the line in Romeo and Juliet, the day is hot, the castles are abroad, and if we meet, we shall not scape a brawl. The weather bringing out the worst in people, as well as the best. And every fair from fair sometime declines by chance, or nature's changing course untrimmed. Now those lines are quite, at first, a little bit opaque. If we're likening people to the seasons, things can change on you without really you knowing, without you even being aware of it. One day you wake up and you're in the autumn of your life, as opposed to the summer. And sometimes this is just the way that it goes. The fair from fair can decline. And it can be done by chance, or it can just be because nature's changing course is untrimmed. When it says untrimmed, I always think of an overgrown foliage, some sort of plant that you've had in your garden, or indeed in the wild, which has not been cut back. It's sort of quite, in its own way, it's designed to be wild and free, but that's what makes it kind of a little bit dangerous. And again, just like with nature, you cannot always prune these things. They have to just be what they are. A bit like love, I guess, You can't cultivate it. It has to be natural. And then we get our volta here. So, in a sonnet, the volta means to turn. It means that we turn from one side to the next. Typically, but not always, a volta is quite obvious. It happens after the first 8 lines, the octave, and then moves into the sestet, which is the final 6 lines. This isn't always uniform. Volta can happen elsewhere, and mucking around with the form is fun. In this case, it's very obvious. We start with this but thy eternal summer shall not fade. Again, one of the other wonderful lines, and it says a lot about how excellent a wordsmith Shakespeare was. Like he's just having a chat. He could create lines like this that would seem really, thy eternal summer shall not fade. Never underestimate the simple. Because the eternal summer can both be something wonderful and maybe hyperbolic, but also it can be a memory. Your eternal summer, your eternal youth. It's saying, you will always be young to me. You will always be the person I met in that summer. And I think about this a lot. I think about memories, especially as I get older, about, what does prime mean? What does it mean to be in your prime? When do you know when you're out of it? We don't know. I guess I'll find out. But that sense of, it doesn't matter about all this other stuff. It doesn't matter if summer can be too hot. It doesn't matter if it can be imperfect. The fact is, your eternal summer will always be the one for me. I mean, what a romantic line. And it works because it's true. I think true love can do that. True love can make you feel like you live in an eternal summer. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So there's death being mentioned again. He crops up quite a few times in these sonnets, in different forms and different styles. In this case, death is being slightly thwarted, because his shade can't be, you cannot escape death, but death can't brag about taking you because you will always be beautiful for me. That's how I've always read that as well. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. It's a stunning last 2 lines, couplet. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. It's almost like a little infinity loop. A paradoxical sort of ending to this poem in a way. Saying that, you know what, a summer's day is incredibly short, and summers are incredibly short, and they don't really last. But you know what, as long as I have you, that summer can't fade. This sense of the eyes that can see, and as I breathe, I can just be. You as a person, you as my love, you don't actually have to worry about those things because it will always give life to you. It can also have an element of, if you wanted to read it more cynically, you could point out the idea that it's a fallacy. Eventually people stop breathing, eventually I stop seeing. So nothing can last forever. But it's almost a celebration of that, saying it might not fade, and when it does fade, I won't be around to know it's faded. So who cares? It's a beautiful poem. I mean, in a way, it's a perfect companion piece to Sonnet 116, which I will just briefly skim over now. I'm not going to read the whole thing because that would be cheating. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. So we've got a lot of similar ideas here of taking love and asking, well, can we improve it? Can we change it? But actually, that's not what this is about. It's not what it should be about. It's an ever-fixed mark. It is the star to every wandering bark. His love sonnets, the most famous ones at least, like to build up a resistance to the idea of death. Love is not time's fool. It is this idea that it can't be taken by time. And we know that to not really be true, because when people die, they can no longer love. But equally, if you believe in love as an eternal force, maybe it doesn't belong to a single person. Maybe it gets passed on. I don't know. I'm just a guy who's philosophizing in the middle of a woods when I should really be going out and getting the coffees for the rest of my team. So I'm going to leave you with that, dear listener. But if you ever get the opportunity, go and study some Shakespeare sonnets. You'll be glad that you did. I must exit, because I believe a bear is coming. Adieu. Now, I don't really see why I have to read Shakespeare's poems. I mean, he's never read any of mine.